All right, get ready, because today we're diving into something pretty interesting. We're going to be exploring the concept of beauty, but here's the twist. Our source material comes from, get this, a website designed for computer programmers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you heard right. Lists of the most beautiful people right there next to coding tutorials and, algorithm challenges.
Yeah.
It's like, finding like a 5-star recipe tucked into a physics textbook.
Right.
It's a little unexpected, but I think that's what makes it, a good deep dive.
It definitely piques my interest, that's for sure. This blend of beauty, something we usually consider, subjective and emotional, presented in this world of logic and objectivity like programming,
Yeah.
it's a fascinating paradox.
For sure. It's like they're trying to, debug beauty, like find the source code for attractiveness. And speaking of code, one thing that keeps popping up in these lists is this golden ratio. Can you kind of, give us a quick explanation on what that is?
Absolutely. The golden ratio, it's often, symbolized by the Greek letter phi.
Okay.
And it represents this mathematical proportion, roughly 1.618. You can kind of think of it as like a mathematical fingerprint that pops up in tons of places, like the arrangement of petals in a sunflower or the spiral of a nautilus shell. Even way back, ancient Greek architects used it when designing buildings like the Parthenon because they believed it held the key to, visual harmony.
Oh, wow. So this ratio, it's not just some random number. It's been influencing how people see beauty for centuries.
Exactly, for centuries. And that's where it gets really interesting with these most beautiful lists, because they're taking this ancient concept and they're applying it to human faces. They're suggesting that faces that are closer to this ratio are perceived as more attractive. It's an attempt to, I guess you could say, find a mathematical basis for beauty. A way to quantify something that, we feel is inherently subjective.
It's like they're saying you can measure beauty with a ruler and a calculator.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, so maybe not like a foolproof beauty formula, but it is interesting that people want to find patterns, even in something like beauty, which, feels subjective.
Right.
So who does this website say is at the top of their most beautiful women in the world list?
Well, leading the pack is Jodie Comer.
Oh, yeah.
She's a British actress, probably most well known for Killing Eve. But it's interesting, she actually just recently won a Tony Award for her role in Prima Facie.
Wow.
And I wonder, if seeing someone like Comer, succeeding in her craft, being so charismatic and talented, if that actually influences how people see her beauty.
It's like a halo effect.
Exactly.
Where, her talent makes her seem even more beautiful.
Exactly. It's like how we perceive beauty is very rarely just based on physical features, achievements, personality traits, even the context, where we see someone, all these things play a part.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes me think about the next person on the list, Zendaya. She's done so much modeling, singing. She's an award-winning actress. And she's also, become a really powerful voice for her generation. I feel like her ranking so high, along with all that she's accomplished, really shows that beauty standards might be changing.
Right.
It's not just about, like classic features anymore.
Right.
It's about confidence, talent, and succeeding in lots of different areas.
That's a really interesting observation, and I think you're right. Zendaya being on the list, alongside all that she's done, it does seem to reflect, maybe a shift in how beauty is perceived, especially by, younger generations.
Right.
She really embodies a generation that values ambition, self-expression, and breaking, traditional molds. And those are considered beautiful by a lot of people.
And it's not just actors and singers who made the list. This website also included athletes like Serena Williams, who is obviously celebrated for her tennis skills.
Yes.
But also for her strength and powerful physique.
Absolutely. And I think, Williams being on the list just emphasizes how much people appreciate athleticism and, physical capabilities as a part of beauty. There's definitely a move away from just focusing on delicate features.
Right.
Instead, recognizing beauty in a strong, healthy body. It's a departure from what we've considered the norm, and it's embracing a much, broader spectrum of what we see as beautiful.
It seems like beauty standards are becoming more inclusive.
Yes.
Expanding past, those narrow definitions of the past. Now, they also have these most beautiful from each country sections, which is really cool because it shows how beauty ideals can be different in different cultures.
Yes.
Like, for example, in India, Aishwarya Rai is always ranked really high on these lists.
Aishwarya Rai is a perfect example of how, cultural context shapes beauty standards.
Yeah.
In India, they have a long history of appreciating large, expressive eyes, a feature that Rai is really known for. And it's a good reminder that beauty isn't one size fits all. It's shaped by different cultural traditions, values, and aesthetic preferences, across the globe.
Right. And that makes me think about their most naturally beautiful list, which honestly kind of made me wonder, how can anyone be naturally beautiful when beauty standards are always changing and are so tied to culture?
You've hit upon a very key point there.
Yeah.
The whole concept of natural beauty is, well, it's loaded with assumptions.
Right.
And often it reflects, what society expects rather than some sort of objective truth.
Right.
It implies that there's only one right or unmodified way to be beautiful, which often just isn't reality.
Yeah, it's like saying there's only one way to be beautiful and everyone else needs to, conform.
Exactly.
And speaking of potentially problematic beauty standards, they also have a most beautiful body section.
Yes. And with that section, it's really important to recognize that body image ideals are heavily influenced by cultural norms.
Right.
And can change drastically over time. What might be considered attractive in one era or in one region might be viewed totally differently somewhere else.
Yeah, like the ideal female body type has changed so much throughout history.
Exactly.
Like what was considered beautiful in those Renaissance paintings is totally different from what's considered beautiful today.
Precisely. Which is why it's so important to look at these discussions critically. Recognizing the huge diversity of human bodies and celebrating individuality.
So basically, don't let any list tell you what a beautiful body should look like.
Exactly. Beauty is not one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's about embracing and celebrating all those unique qualities that make each individual beautiful.
Now, they also have a most beautiful girl section, but to be honest, the content there is pretty limited. Maybe it's for the best, because focusing just on youth can send, not the best message.
I agree. Our perceptions of beauty, both individually and as a society, naturally evolve as we age.
Right.
What we might find attractive in our younger years might not have the same appeal later on.
Yeah.
And that's just a natural progression.
It's about understanding that beauty isn't limited to one specific age or stage of life. But here's what I find so interesting. All these lists, rankings, it's all on a website for programmers.
Yeah.
Why would they have all this on a space that's dedicated to logic and code? Is there a connection there?
It's definitely something to think about. Perhaps there's a psychological link between a profession that deals with logic and patterns,
right,
and trying to find those same elements in something like beauty, which is seemingly, subjective.
It's like they're trying to crack the code of attractiveness.
Right.
Trying to find the algorithm for beauty.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
Is beauty something that we can actually quantify and categorize? Or are we just trying to, impose order on something that is ultimately subjective and personal?
Right.
It's really fascinating.
And it's definitely a question we'll keep exploring in the next part of our deep dive, so stay with us.
Welcome back to our deep dive, looking at beauty through, the lens of a computer programming website.
Yeah, it has been quite a journey so far.
It really has.
And honestly, all this talk about the golden ratio and these most beautiful lists, it's left me with, more questions than answers. Like, where do our ideas about beauty even come from? Is it, nature, nurture, or some combination of the two?
That's a question that has puzzled pretty much everyone for ages, philosophers, artists, scientists. And you're right, it's probably this really complex mix of things from a biological perspective.
Okay.
We know that humans are kind of wired to find certain traits attractive, like symmetry, for example. It's often seen as like an indicator of good health and good genes.
So there's like an evolutionary reason for it.
Right.
Like, we're drawn to people who we think would be good partners.
Exactly.
For survival, for having kids.
Exactly. But it's not just biology.
Right.
Our environment plays a huge role, too. Think about how much beauty standards have changed over time, like the, curvy figures that were celebrated in Renaissance art, completely different from the really thin physiques that were popular in the 90s.
Yeah.
And these trends, they're influenced by everything. Media, social norms, even economic conditions play a part.
So basically, what we think is beautiful is always being shaped by the world around us.
Exactly.
Interesting. And it's not even just about how someone looks, right?
Right.
It's also about, our personal experiences.
Yes.
The values we have, our individual tastes.
It all contributes.
Yeah, it all adds up to how we see beauty.
Exactly. When you think about someone that you find beautiful, it's probably not just about their looks.
Yeah.
It's about their personality, their energy, how they make you feel.
Yeah, that's so true. When I think about the people I find beautiful, it's definitely a combination of things.
Right.
It's their kindness, their sense of humor, how passionate they are about things.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond just how they look.
Exactly. And that's what makes beauty so fascinating. It's so personal. It's not like this fixed thing. It's this fluid, always changing experience. All these lists we've been talking about, as much as they try to rank beauty, put it in order, they just can't capture everything that makes someone beautiful.
It's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Exactly.
But okay, let's go back to these lists for a minute.
Huh?
We've talked about some of the women who are on them, but I'm curious, were there any big names missing? Anyone you were surprised wasn't on the list?
That's a great question. And I think it's important to remember that these lists are always going to be limited. They're based on, one specific set of criteria, probably influenced by the website's audience and whatever algorithm they're using.
Right.
So there are going to be lots of people who are considered incredibly beautiful who won't be on these lists.
Right, because it's not like there's a set number of beautiful people in the world. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder after all. But it makes me wonder, do you think these lists have any real impact on people? Do they actually change how we see beauty? Or are they just, harmless fun?
I think that's an important question. On one hand, it's easy to say, oh, it's just, lighthearted fun. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But we also need to remember that these rankings, even if they seem arbitrary, they can contribute to this culture where beauty is the same as worth.
Especially when they're so definitive, like, here are the top 10 most beautiful women. End of story.
Right.
It creates a really limited idea of what beauty is.
Exactly. And that can be really harmful.
Yeah.
Especially for young people who are already dealing with so many images and messages about how they should look.
Right.
It's really important to be able to think critically about these things, understand media and how it works so we can better understand these rankings and see their limitations.
So we should basically take these lists with a grain of salt.
Right.
Knowing that they don't show the whole picture.
Exactly. Enjoy them, for fun.
Right.
But remember that beauty is way too complex to be summed up in a simple ranking. And the most important thing is to recognize that real beauty comes from celebrating individuality, embracing diversity, and appreciating the unique things that make each person special.
I love that. It's like instead of trying to fit into some external standard,
Right.
we should be celebrating the beauty in ourselves and in everyone around us.
Exactly. And, going back to these lists being on a programmer's website, maybe it shows this deeper human desire to find order in the world, even in things that are abstract and subjective.
Right.
We like patterns. We look for meaning.
Yeah.
And sometimes we try to impose those patterns even where they might not actually exist.
So maybe it's not so much about figuring out beauty,
Right.
but more about our need to find meaning and structure in something that can feel so personal and intangible.
Exactly. And in a way, that search for order, that desire to understand and appreciate beauty, even if it is subjective and hard to grasp,
Right.
that's beautiful in itself. It shows our curiosity and our ability to, be amazed and wonder.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
It's like saying the journey of exploring beauty is just as important as beauty itself.
Exactly. And on that note, we want to ask you, the listener, a question. After looking at all these lists and hearing our discussion, what does beauty mean to you?
Yeah.
Can you easily define it? Or is it more of a feeling?
Right. What makes someone or something beautiful to you?
Take some time to really think about that.
Yeah, we'll be here, ready to dive into your thoughts when you get back. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've talked about a lot today.
We have.
It's not every day you go from computer code to, talking about beauty.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, and we started with those most beautiful lists from that programmer website.
Right.
Which honestly just gave us even more questions.
I do.
Yeah. We went from ancient Greece and the golden ratio to like modern beauty standards and how media and culture affect them. We even talked about why programmers are ranking beautiful people in the first place.
Right.
And through it all, I think one thing's become clear. Beauty is way more complicated than any list or algorithm can show.
I agree. It really is.
Yeah, it's like a tapestry.
Yeah.
It's made up of so many things: physical features, personality, talent, cultural influences, even our own personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And, before we ended the last part, we asked you, our listener, to think about what beauty means to you.
It's a question that deserves, some real thought.
Yeah.
Does beauty just mean how someone looks on the outside? Or does it mean something deeper, something more?
Yeah, maybe for you, beauty is the kindness you see in a stranger, or the resilience of people, or the power of nature.
Or maybe you find beauty in art and creativity,
Right.
the excitement of watching athletes, or that quiet moment you share with someone you love.
We spent this episode unpacking how other people define beauty.
Right.
But ultimately, what matters most is how you see it.
It's about noticing the beauty in those everyday moments, the beauty in things that aren't perfect,
Yeah.
and the beauty that exists beyond, all those conventional standards.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want you to hold on to that thought. Beauty isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Yes, it's an ongoing exploration.
Keep asking questions, keep discovering new things, and most importantly, keep defining beauty on your own terms.
That's what matters.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you next time.